In the fantasy hockey game, there is no sexier topic than a good sleeper. And on the Friday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, we're kicking off our NHL-wide team-by-team sleeper pick, kicking it off with the Central Division and some overlooked players. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, my fantasy fanatics, and welcome back to your daily 30-minute source for all things fantasy hockey. It is the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, and I am joined, as always, by my distinguished co-host, Mr. Steele Rodin. On this side of the microphone, it's your boy, Big Flip Livingstone, where you know I got to start by giving a shout-out to the everydayers who continue to make us their first listen every single day. We see you, we appreciate you. And we're ready to return the love, Steele, because it's pen and paper time. Get the notepad out. We're taking a look at a number of sleepers. We're going to go division by division. Hat tip to our boys at Apples and Ginos who just did a version of this for themselves. This is a good one, Steele, because sleepers are sexy in the fantasy game. And pegging even one or are all of these going to pan out? No, but pegging one or two could be huge to taking your team over the top. So we'll do the Central Division. You got 4 teams. I got 4 teams. Over to you, my friend. Where are you starting? Who are you looking at?
I'm going to start with the Colorado Avalanche, and I want to start with Brock Nelson. I mean, when you look throughout the team right now, there's not really much to go based off of when you get into deep cut, really deep leagues. Like, I still don't think Victor Olofsson's a good look. Guys like Ross Colton, Jack Drury, more of a streaming option throughout the week if you just need a little bit of help or you have an open spot. I still think Brock Nelson brings a ton of value, and I'm not quite sure why he's getting hate thrown his way when it comes to fantasy leagues, people fading him out there. I'm not too keen on that. I still think he brings a ton of value. 13 points in 19 games once traded to the Colorado Avalanche. And my argument's based off of he just has so much more to work with. I mean, over the last 5-6 years with the New York Islanders, he did not have a lot of talent surrounded by him. Matt Barzal was constantly injured. Bo Horvat got there, a couple of seasons ago. Anders Lee was injured as well from time to time. He was the go-to guy, the goal scorer, the playmaker, leading them in points. And he does that. He averages, 50, 55 points. He's just been a consistent player. He rarely misses any time. And he has a lot more talent surrounded him in Colorado. Still centering that second line between Gabriel Landeskog and Valeri Nichushkin, who is a very underrated player going into fantasy hockey this year as well. Some injury risk with that guy, but he's getting top 6 minute. And while he might be on the second power play unit, it's not like he was getting anything done on the man advantage with the New York Islanders anyway. They had one of the worst power plays, so it doesn't matter. He does all of his work 5-on-5, and he's just a consistent veteran value type of player. I'm seeing an ADP for Brock Nelson around 146.8. He was currently ranked going into Yahoo this season at 83. I think that's a little high for where Yahoo has him ranked, but somewhere in that 13th, 14th, 15th round, we talked about some value picks for centermen in the later rounds. He's one of those for me.
And this is one of those situations and episodes that I would say we have varying degrees of deep cuts here. Brock Nelson, I would say, is at the higher end of these sleepers that you and I have. And that goes along with the quality of team, because at the bottom of the Central Division, and I'm going to talk about the Chicago Blackhawks in a second here, it's not as sexy. However, given your format, these are the angles you really almost need to know more than what to do at the top of your draft is what to do at the end of it. And these players are all going to fit into that mold. And in the keeper dynasty realm, this is really going to be a conversation that you want to perhaps revisit. So you know what it is. Smash that follow button. Don't miss any episodes. The Colorado Avalanche last year finished 6th in the NHL in goal scoring. So that right there, as the second line center, he's going to get some secondary power play time, most likely as well, Steele.
I think so.
A very attractive sleeper pick that maybe no one's paying attention to. And here's the deepest one on my list. It's Sam Rinzel. And I'm not going to come on here and say I watched a ton of University of Minnesota Big Ten hockey or his 9 games in the NHL. But what I have done is read up on this player. And he was drafted in the first round only 3 drafts ago for a reason, Steele. And let's put a little bit more respect on the American USA hockey system over the last number of years. It's no joke anymore. They're churning out really good players, and he was a member of the 2024 World Junior American Club. The caliber is there for this player. His little flash in the pan of 9 games in the NHL produced 5 assists, Steele, 12 hits, 5 blocks, 22 shots on net. He's a lanky defenseman who is a pretty good skater who has a lot of development to go. But it looks like he might potentially be a guy who eats a lot of minutes this year. The Chicago Blackhawks, and I had to double check this because this almost didn't make sense. On the power play last year, the Chicago Blackhawks were the 7th best power play unit in the league. If he catches any time on that top power play unit, which it's projected that he does, and Spencer Knight with a new juicy contract and a ton of opportunity pans out even in the slightest, this is a deep cut. It's risky. Keeper dynasty, though, Steele, Sam Rinzel might be a really sneaky final D-man that you draft or you look to the waiver wire in regular leagues, and he might be a player who sticks week to week depending on Chicago's lineup. He's a deep sleeper. Sam Rinzel, put the name in the back pocket and thank Uncle Flip later.
And that's what we're looking for on today's episode. And from one rookie defenseman to another, I got to talk about Zeev Buium of the Minnesota Wild. We lightly talked about him a week ago when we talked about some young guns and some prospects, but I had to come on here and talk about him. You know, I think the easy answer would be to go with Marco Rossi, a guy who had 60 points last year, still trying to,
choice.
You know, yeah, the obvious choice would be Marco Rossi, the easy choice. And again, the guy who had 60 points and is still trying to find that level of consistency in his game with the Minnesota Wild. But I think with Buium coming into the league and coming in with the Minnesota Wild has a great opportunity to really take control and take that number 1 spot away from Brock Faber, because Brock Faber was absolutely atrocious last year in his second season in the National Hockey League. Career low, I believe 29 or 35 points, somewhere in that range for him. But I look at Buium coming into the league as a 12th overall pick in the 24 draft. He's a smooth skating defender, strong skills on both ends of the ice, extremely high IQ. And he was maintaining a point per game with the University of Denver in the NCAA. So he knows how to create some space. He knows how to quarterback that power play. You know, with the Denver, I think he can translate that over to the NHL level. And he actually has he has a really good underrated shot from the point. He knows how to get pucks through and find his teammates. So I think he's a very deep sleeper pick. And again, somewhere in that range of 130th, 140th is where he's getting picked on average.
And he gets the benefit of playing in front of a very good goaltender in Philip Gustafsson. We don't need to go back down that path, Steele. You proved me wrong yesterday. I admitted it. He should have been in the top 10. That's okay. But that is a huge benefit for a rookie defenseman. When you know if that puck goes over your shoulder or perhaps you make a bad decision, Gus Bus is going to be there to bail him out a whole bunch. That's going to lead to some fantasy value. We've got a whole bunch of players to talk about. So let me just spit out Barrett Hayton very quickly, Steele, because there's a lot of other names here on this Utah Mammoth team that's catching a lot of attention. Excuse me. I had to clear the old throat there. This Miller High Life isn't cutting it. Barrett Hayton is a player that, you know, so I've got 2 deep cuts on my list. I've got 2 kind of players that I'm really excited about this season, and Barrett Hayton is one of them. You know, he heads into this year 25 years old. He was a 5th overall draft pick. Has he lived up to that hype? Clearly, he has not. But last year, career high 20 goals, career high 46 points. He played 82 games aside from 2023-24 where he was injured and only played 33. That would be 2 out of 3 years of playing 82 games. So he's been fairly durable over the last 3 seasons. He can mix it up. He went from 2 years of 80-plus hits to right down, and I think that had to do with his injury history, Steele. However, what I'm trying to spit out here, and it's not coming out too well for me, he mixes it up. He's
doing a good job.
He's hitting the second-line center in Utah. He's going to play with Paterka and probably Nick Schmaltz. That's going to mix around a little bit, but I don't think it matters because the Utah Mammoth are a team that you and I have said repeatedly you want to get a piece of. Barrett Hayton also with the 46 points last year, 45 penalty minutes. You're getting good peripheral coverage. He's going to eat more minutes. The team is going to improve. This is a player that I don't think anyone's going to pay attention to, and he might be the 4th or 5th Mammoth forward off the board, but I still see a ton of value here in this centerman Steele and the Utah Mammoth overall.
And that's exactly what I was going to say is you throw JJ Paterka into the mix and you get a guy who also at the, with his time in Buffalo wasn't able to establish himself as one of those key guys. He gets traded, he signs with Utah. And I think those are two players that can really lean on each other. Nick Schmaltz still in the mix, not a guy who's going to jump off the page when it comes to fantasy points, but offensive production, he's still upwards and has the potential of putting up 50, 60, 65 point seasons. And I think that's a very dangerous second line, but obviously Keller and Dylan Guenther is what you're looking to get out of Utah.
Most definitely. We've got more players to talk about. Another deep cut, another very sexy pick on the St. Louis Blues that I want to talk about, Steele, at the end of my list. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season, it's here, baby, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with can't-miss offers all season long. Right now, new customers that bet $5 and hit get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Same game parlays, live bets, touchdown scorers, everything you need on FanDuel. It makes it easy and fun to get in on the action. What are you waiting for? Ready to play? Download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com today to get started. That's FanDuel.com and place that first $5 wager.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review for your boys here, Flip Livingstone and Steele Rodin. Over to the Dallas Stars. Again, when you get into some of these really good teams, it's kind of hard to find these sleeper picks. And when I always find sleepers, quote unquote, when I always go into the draft, I really try to look for those veteran players, guys that have value with just their consistency in the league. And that's what I was trying to aim at when I was talking about Brock Nelson. I'm doing the same when it comes to Jamie Benn. We already know who the cream of the crop is when it comes to the Dallas Stars: Robertson, Rantanen, Johnston, Hintz, Harley, Heiskanen, Ottinger. Yes. But you get some guys in the bottom six. I know you mentioned Maverick Bourque the other day. I wasn't quite sure about that suggestion going into the season. Jamie Benn, for me, he still brings the value. The veteran value is what I'm looking at. Not the star he once was. Obviously, the trend has been declining for him with the offensive production, but he can still quietly put up some solid secondary numbers, still gets power play one exposure. Maybe that changes, obviously, going into the season with Rantanen into the mix, but gets a ton of hits, ton of penalty minutes as well. 114 hits last year. 70 penalty minutes to add on to that, 136 shots. It's just one of those guys that brings that veteran value, and you can draft him with your second or third last pick.
Dallas Stars are just also such a good balanced club that no longer he doesn't have to be that guy that's counted on night in and night out. And, he was the prototypical and still is a prototypical leader, warrior kind of guy on and off the ice. But he doesn't have to carry that burden every night. So, and I think at this portion of his career, that could really translate into some sleeper value. And especially when that Dallas Stars team is going to score goals with Mikko Rantanen now regularly in the mix and kind of comfortable and cemented in Dallas. He changed cities twice last year, Steele, and he still put up numbers. So what does he do now with a full off season and preseason and training camp all with the same club? Could be huge. This Nashville Predators team is a tough one for me to get behind in terms of telling people to buy into players other than the household names that we've already spoken about. And we don't need to talk about Yossi, Saros, Stammer, or any, Forsberg or any. I'd say those are the top four this year. We throw in maybe Marchessault as well. Looking at a player in Luke Evangelista, this is a deep cut for sure. However, the upside in this player and the offensive ability that potentially could come if he sticks with a player like Steven Stamkos on the second line or on the second power play unit. Right now, he doesn't have a contract. And I was reading earlier today that he's not going to be attending training camp without a contract. And for a guy who put up 32 points in 68 games, intriguing as a 22-year-old player for sure. Extrapolate that to 82 games, and you're looking at something with a 22-year-old. However, it makes this even a deeper cut because if for some reason he gets no training camp Steele and he comes in with the heat from Barry Trotz of holding out, quote unquote, I don't know if I'm actually going to be going after this player. However, it's one that I still think you should keep your eye on, especially if we continue to buy into the narrative that there's no way the Nashville Predators repeat this woeful offensive performance that was last year, finishing second last in the NHL in goals for. If we're looking at Nashville and we're looking at sleepers, there's not a ton here. So Luke Evangelista fits the mold as a player who could bring 45 to 50 point value if he plays 82 games. That's valuable. He might be a waiver wire darling. I'm going to throw his name in the mix. Let's see if he gets a contract, however, and then we can get a little bit more excited.
Yeah, there's definitely a bounce back waiting for this Nashville team. Again, I said it the other day. I don't see how it's possible for it to be worse than what happened last year. There's just no possible way that happens again to the Nashville Predators. Over to the Winnipeg Jets real quickly. I kind of bounced around with who I wanted to go with when it came to these sleeper options.
I like this
I just
one
mentioned. I just mentioned to you that, how are we evaluating? How are we projecting Cole Perfetti to play this season after a 50-point year last year with 82 games played? Is he going to outperform that possibly? It's kind of a question mark with, a Jonathan Taves who hasn't played in 2 seasons, kind of a washed up Gustav Nyquist as well. So that's an interesting angle to look at Cole Perfetti. I also was interested in a guy like Nino Niederreiter, who I always seem to pick up on the waiver wire.
Somewhat surprised you didn't talk about Nino here.
I know. I wanted to so bad because of how often he ends up on my team. He always sneaks in there somehow. And it just, again, one of those veteran value guys who just kind of, consistently puts up fantasy points every single game. Ended up going with Neil Pionk on the blue line. And I think he's one of those guys when you look at his game, obviously not going to jump off the page. He can usually put up 30 to 40 points in a season. He had 39 points in 69 games last year. And obviously Josh Morrissey is the number one guy, but often gets looks on that second power play unit, penalty kill specialist as well. He gets the hits, he gets the blocks. He's just one of those steady as you go players, and his floor is very high in multi-category formats. He's not flashy, but he's one of those managers who wait on defensemen, and you can get some really good value from a guy like Neil Pionk. So even with, missing 12 games last year, I think his value can go up, significantly.
And what's interesting is, and I think this was the case for most of last year, is he plays with Dylan Sandberg. And I don't want to sound crazy here because I don't watch a ton of Winnipeg Jets hockey. And obviously Josh Morrissey is the straw that stirs the drink for them defensively or offensively, defenseman-wise. Here we go. Dylan Sandberg and Neil Pionk, I think, are their most important and reliable defensive pairing. And Neil Pionk has been a guy that I pretty much added him halfway through the year last year, Steele, or even earlier, and I had him on my team all year. Because if he doesn't pitch in offensively, he kind of covers your bases peripherally. And then when he does chip in with an assist here or a random goal there, it's a bonus. Love this take from you. I really think that the Winnipeg Jets are going to be in for another big regular season. I don't know about after that, given their postseason track record. But for now, this is a team that you can feel, I don't want to say fantasy goldmine, but they are a really good option for 4 or 5 elite picks. Cole Perfetti, I don't think fits the mold anymore. Just to wrap this up before we go to break, doesn't fit the mold anymore for me as sleeper. He, I've been on him for a while, and he finally emerged last year. Maybe in those more casual leagues, you could throw him out there as a sleeper for the most part. I agree with your take here. I like it. I got one more player after the break. I'm ready to get there whenever you are, pal.
We will get there after the break. So much more to break down with sleepers across the National Hockey League Pacific Division coming next to start Monday. Maybe actually a Monday mock draft, of course, which we didn't get to last week. But the St. Louis Blues sleeper pick coming up next. And once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Smash that subscribe button below, hit the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Flip, I'm just going to throw it straight over to you. Last team in the Central, St. Louis Blues. Sleeper pick, who are you looking at?
Yeah, look, the St. Louis Blues were a very average team last year when you look at the numbers. And I know once Jim Montgomery got in there behind the bench, they looked like a different club. And we've thrown out names like Jimmy Snuggerud before as a potential sleeper option. So, and I didn't want to bring up his name again. but one that might be less of a sleeper because he's been getting it done in the NHL to the tune of, around to the 40-point mark as a 21, 22-year-old is Jake Neighbours. And this is a guy that I had on my keeper team last year, and I just had to make him one of my last cuts. He wasn't quite a keeper for me, but still, this guy had 173 hits last year and 22 goals. Again, the St. Louis Blues are a bit of a hard team to buy into overall. And given that emergence of guys like Jimmy Snuggerud and Dylan Holloway, Jake Neighbours might be fighting for minutes in the top 6, a spot that he had for a good chunk of last year. And that could play into maybe a teeter off moment, or he's might peaked at 45-ish points. That's valuable. So is 173 hits. So is 56 penalty minutes and almost 200 shots on net. This was the player that I was most excited to talk about. I like this kid's game. I like his high energy. He is only 23 years old, and he was a first-round draft pick, Steele. The St. Louis Blues are going to be the prototypical wild card bubble team for me until they make some roster moves of some descript. And no, Cam Fowler isn't moving the needle for me, even though he played great for them. I think that may have been a little bit of a lightning in a bottle situation. This team is very average across the board. No big superstar, an aging goaltender, a pretty solid blue line, but no one that really stands out. So, at the end of the day, for me, Jake Neighbours is a player that I very, very much want to go after, especially in the sleeper conversation that we are going to continue to have. All divisions will be covered on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. And he's back, baby.
Not exactly sure what just happened. My Wi-Fi just completely shut
I had you covered. I was flawless. I had you covered.
I know it was flawless. And look, that was strange, but I absolutely love this pick, Jake Neighbours, and there's a lot of really good options as well. I like that you're highlighting Jake Neighbours on today's episode. You talked about Jimmy Snuggerud a few episodes ago, and obviously this team really likes
Dylan
what they're
Holloway
seeing from this
too,
kid.
maybe.
I was just about to say Dylan Holloway. We can't forget about the season he had: 63 points in 77 games, 165 hits, 178 shots. Really good options with the St. Louis Blues, actually, when it comes to some deep cuts and some sleeper picks. All three of those guys, actually, I'd be keen on drafting and picking in the later stages of the draft. So
thank you, sir.
Really surprising with some of these picks from the St. Louis Blues that we just talked about. Again, stay tuned in all week long. We'll break down the Pacific Division next. One sleeper from each team in each division. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your second listen, you know what it is, though. Go check out the Locked On NHL podcast because there is no offseason. We bring you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, and we'll see you back here again on Monday.
Let's go, Buffalo.